Live from the Scripps Studios, this is 10 News.
Iran is continuing to vow revenge as millions mourn the death of the country's top military commander who was killed in a U.S. drone strike. Tonight, there are new threats from both sides. Good evening, I'm Lindsay Pena.
And I'm Ben Higgins in for Steve Atkinson. Let's get you caught up on the latest. President Trump is vowing to answer any retaliation with force, and thousands of U.S. troops have deployed, with many of them already arriving in the Middle East. We have team coverage, including a look at increased security at local military bases. We begin with ABC's Mona Kosar Abdi in Washington.
Iran entering another day of mourning over the loss of its top military commander, Qasem Soleimani. The country's supreme leader shedding tears over Soleimani's coffin during his funeral Monday, surrounded by a sea of mourners paying tribute to a man revered by many, but also with the blood of hundreds of American troops on his hands. Washington watching closely, bracing for Iran's next move. Soleimani's replacement vowing for revenge, while in Iraq, members of the parliament, at the request of the prime minister, took a non-binding vote to expel all American troops. Aboard Air Force One, President Trump warning Iraq, a U.S. ally, that if it follows through on removing U.S. troops, quote, we will charge them sanctions like they've never seen before, ever. Regarding Iran this morning, the president tweeted in all caps, quote, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Following its announcement, it will no longer abide by any operational constraints under the 2015 nuclear deal. NATO Secretary General calling for restraint and de-escalation in the region.
A new conflict would be in no one's interest. So Iran must refrain from further violence and provocations.
In a letter to her colleagues Sunday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the airstrike, quote, provocative and disproportionate, announcing the House will vote on a war powers resolution to limit the president's military actions. And in the Senate, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called the president's foreign policy erratic and unsuccessful.
We do not need this president either bumbling or impulsively getting us into a major war.
And on Wednesday, there will be an all-Senate meeting to discuss the Soleimani strike and the rising tensions with Iran. Mona Kosar Abdi, ABC News, Washington.
And here in San Diego, military bases are increasing security measures as tensions rise in the Middle East.
10 News reporter Mimi Alcala joins us live near Naval Base Point Loma. And Mimi, you spoke with a military veteran who says this is common practice after incidents like we saw last week.
Yeah, Lindsay, Ben, the veteran that we spoke to, says sometimes this happens multiple times a year, but we usually just don't hear about it. As tensions rise in the Middle East, military bases across San Diego County are beefing up security measures.
To not take a threat seriously is irresponsible and unprofessional.
Veteran Mark Damon, who served in Iraq with the Marine Corps, says this is common practice.
In this case, it might be just a few weeks. It might be just a few days.
That's still unknown, but Damon says when there is a credible threat or something significant has happened involving the U.S. military, base leadership will often choose to tighten security.
There will be increased manpower applied to security, but they may change the way you have to enter into the gate, change entranceways and such.
And that means possibly waiting longer to get onto base. Officials are warning that military law enforcement will check all ID cards and also increase vehicle inspections, which in turn could cause backups. MCAS Miramar, Camp Pendleton, and Naval Base Point Loma all announcing this through tweets. In a statement to 10 News, a spokesperson for the U.S. Northern Command says, quote, while we cannot discuss specifics, U.S. Northern Command is implementing additional force protection condition measures to increase security and awareness for all installations in the U.S. NORTHCOM area of responsibility.
Generally, the bases act in a prudent manner to just make sure that their security is as aggressive as possible, but so that there isn't a feeling in the community that they're going on alert or causing hysteria.
And over at MCAS Miramar, military personnel are encouraged to use the west and north gates during commuting hours. Again, it's still unclear how long these security measures will be in place. We're live in Point Loma. Mimi Alcala, 10 News.
Thank you, Mimi. And be sure to stay with 10 News for continuing coverage of this still developing story. Coming up new at 6, why experts say any retaliation from Iran could take one of two forms.
There are new developments involving the man who killed his roommate, stuffed his body in a barrel, and then tossed it into San Diego Bay. Today, Timothy Cook was sentenced to 56 years to life in state prison.
10 News reporter Matt Boone explains how the victim's sister confronted the killer today, and things got pretty emotional.
In the past 2 weeks, I cried more than I cried in the past 2 years combined.
Alicia Villegas says she's been thinking about this day for 2 years, about what she'd want to say to the man who killed her brother.
I wish I could say, yeah, I hate and, live on that emotion. But it makes me sad to know that my brother lost his life because of somebody's hurt and brokenness.
Wiping tears away, the convicted killer, Timothy Cook, listened as Omar Medina's sister and mother forgave him, though cautioned him of his own guilt.
Pero yo le quiero decir
But I would like to tell him
que habrá otro tribunal
but there will be another trial
al final de nuestra vida.
at the end of our lives.
Medina's body was found shoved inside a barrel in the San Diego Bay in October of 2017. The gruesome case sent shockwaves through local law enforcement who searched for the person who could have committed such a crime. At trial, Cook admitted he had helped dispose the body in the bay, but through his lawyer today maintained his innocence on the murder charge.
I know with 100% certainty that I did not murder Mr. Medina, and the deputy DA still has not shown that I committed an act that caused his death.
But the jury did not buy that argument, nor did Medina's sister.
I'm sure your family would forgive you too. You shouldn't put them through that and telling them you're innocent when you know you're not.
Now, there is another lingering element to all of this. That jury actually was deadlocked on whether or not to convict the co-defendant on an accessory charge. He was the one who drove the boat while they dumped the barrel. In May, prosecutors will decide whether or not to try another trial against that man. Reporting live tonight downtown, Matt Boone, 10 News.
Thank you, Matt. This tanker trailer is now right side up after it overturned and spilled 2,500 gallons of pool chlorine in Spring Valley. It happened this morning along Hamishaw Boulevard. Crews tell us the asphalt gave way and the tanker tipped over. That spill is now contained and the crews are working on cleanup. Officials tell us no chlorine got into the Sweetwater Reservoir.
A woman is in the hospital after a hit-and-run driver crashed into her while she was crossing the street in National City. You see paramedics here getting her onto a stretcher to take her to the hospital. Police say the crash happened around 7:30 this morning as the woman was crossing East 22nd Street. The driver sped off and left the woman lying in the road. No word yet on the extent of her injuries.
Turning now to weather, Santa Ana winds bringing gusty, dry, and warm conditions to San Diego County.
10 News meteorologist Angelica Campos is tracking it all. Angelica, a wind advisory in effect in our east counties right now.
That's right. And you probably can feel it today. Your hands extra dry because of the Santa Ana winds. This wind advisory will be in effect until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. It includes the mountains, foothills, and our inland valleys. Areas like Poway, Alpine included under the wind advisory. We've had reports of winds over 70 miles per hour today. Very windy this morning and even this afternoon. We continue tracking the wind conditions. The winds averaging 36 miles per hour right now in Alpine and 24 in Julian. But of course, the wind gust will vary into tomorrow morning. That means another day of mild temperatures. Some of you made it to 80 degrees this afternoon. We'll take a look at the numbers and the changes that we'll see throughout the week because big changes are coming.
Thank you, Angelica. The unprecedented wildfires burning in Australia seem to have no end in sight. The fires have scorched more than 14 million acres. The scope of the disaster is clear when you see this map of Australia superimposed on the map of the United States. Families have been forced to take shelter on the coast, from kangaroos to koalas. The impact on wildlife has been devastating.
I've seen numbers that half the koala population have been taken out. Is that true?
It's true in certain areas, yes.
Scientists believe about 500 million animals have died in these fires. Officials say they've had rain in the last 24 hours, but that's actually hindered their backburning efforts. Extreme fire danger will return later this week.
Well, we're getting a closer look at the damage after a 5.8 earthquake shook the entire island of Puerto Rico today. Several homes collapsed and some fell on top of cars. Thousands lost power after the quake. This comes as the island is still reeling from Hurricane Maria more than 2 years ago. Geologists warn of more aftershocks to come. No major injuries were reported.
New information is emerging about disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. He's now facing new charges of rape and other sex crimes in L.A.
As ABC's Trevor Ault reports, this comes as his trial for 5 sex crimes in New York City just got underway.
Today, just hours after his rape trial began in New York City, now infamous Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein hit with new serious allegations in Los Angeles. The district attorney there announcing separate charges of rape and other sex crimes.
We believe the evidence will show that the defendant used his power and influence to gain access to his victims and then committed violent crimes against them.
Weinstein was already charged with 5 sex crimes in New York City. That long-awaited trial beginning this morning with a procedural hearing. Both sides accusing each other of abominable behavior.
At some point, the jurors are just going to start to blame the defense and look like they're victim bashing, which is exactly what they're doing.
Weinstein's lead defense attorney responding, saying she's done nothing but defend her client.
Mr. Weinstein, again, has a right to a fair trial. I think she believes he's convicted already. That's not how this works.
Weinstein has pled not guilty and said any sexual relations were consensual. Today, the prosecution also made several references to 7 photographs they'd be introducing as evidence, not revealing what those show, but saying they'd be handled sensitively so as not to embarrass Weinstein. All the while, outside, several of Weinstein's accusers had gathered, wearing red, they say, to take their power back.
That we've come to this moment of justice is staggering. The trial means so much to so many.
In total, more than 80 women have accused Harvey Weinstein of some form of sexual misconduct, and today those LA investigators said they hope these new charges will inspire even more possible victims to come forward. Trevor Ault, ABC News, New York.
A federal judge is holding freelance journalists and photographers to a new California labor law. Today, a federal judge in LA denied a temporary restraining order sought by 2 freelance organizations against AB 5. The judge said they waited too long to challenge the restrictions that they fear could put some of them out of business. The organizations say the law requires them to treat many as employees instead of independent contractors. A hearing is scheduled for March on the issue.
And I'm Jennifer Kastner in the 10 News Live Center tonight. This just in, a victim has been identified in that deadly shooting that happened in the Mount Hope area. We've got video from the scene. Let's show you. This was on December 29th. The victim has been identified as 54-year-old Daryl Tolliver. He was found dead in an alley after suffering a gunshot wound. According to San Diego police, a man and 2 vehicles were seen leaving that area immediately after the shooting. The man was described as African-American in his 20s, wearing a dark cap, a long-sleeved white sweatshirt, and dark sweatpants. The vehicles were described as a white 1990s Honda Accord and a black Chrysler 300. Anyone with information is asked to please call police. In the Live Center, Jennifer Kastner, 10 News.